In section 5.1.5, pardon me, we're going to be looking at our first foray into absolute value, and it is something that comes up over and over again throughout the course. So we're going to take it into three parts, I think. And the first part is just based on the idea of, well, if it's a variable, how do we know if it's positive or negative or zero? And the answer is we don't know. And then the next question is, how do we make something positive? Because absolute value is a measure of distance from zero on the number line, and distances are positive. So what if we have a negative value in there? We have to consider both possibilities. So let's look at some specific non-variable situations, such as minus 16. Minus 16 is a negative value. In order to make a negative positive, we would put a minus sign in front of it, and it would become a 16. So when the value is negative, we must put a negative in front of it to make it positive. Root 3 minus 1, if you take your calculator out and you go to the square root of 3 minus 1, that will be positive. So we don't need to put a minus sign in front of it itself. Just calculating that answer is positive already, so we can leave it basically as is without having to worry about changing it at all. If we look at 1, take away the cube root of 7, and again you type it into your calculator, that's a negative value. So how do we make a negative value positive? We put a negative in front, and that theme will just reoccur throughout. Now this can be simplified. I didn't do it on that last one, I don't think, but that could become minus 1 plus the cube root of 7. So here's your basic theorem or guide, that there's two possibilities really, that if the value by itself is greater than 0 or equal to 0, we can just leave it as is because it's positive already, or 0. Now if it's negative though, we must put a minus sign in front if it's a negative value. So when we look at a variable situation such as x minus 3, and we consider x minus 3, I'll just draw over here. Terribly, oh, I can't live with that. Sorry, I gotta erase that. We talk about x minus 3, well, that's 0 at 3. Above 3, it would be positive. Below, negative. So there's two scenarios here. So the absolute value of x minus 3 equals two different things. It equals x minus 3 if x is of the interval from 0 to the right forever. So that is from 3 to infinity. But it will equal negative x plus 3, which means just putting the minus sign into it, if it's not that value, which would be below 3, and that's an open bracket. If we look at x cubed minus 9x, again, we're going to need to do a sign analysis of that in order to determine where it's positive and negative. So I can take a common factor of x out. That'll leave me with x squared minus 9, which I could leave, or I could split it up into a difference of squares. And so we have three different zeros. And the resulting sign analysis of all three put together is that. So what is the absolute value of x cubed minus 9x equal to? Again, just two possibilities. It is equal to itself, where it's positive or 0. So that is the interval between minus 3 and 0. Or the interval from 3 to infinity. It is equal to the negative version of itself, so switch the signs of everything, if it's not in those intervals. And again, we'll notice that the negative are open intervals. Whoops, that should be negative infinity. Because it can't be 0. Basically, the 0 goes with the positives. basically it. And you're going to get some practice at doing these types of questions today. And they will get more complicated, like number 6, and you might need some help there. But that's the basic idea. You're going to have to factor them and then determine where they're positive and negative. And you'll run into some difficulties, but just ask, and you should be fine.